All right. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Conversations, Not Confrontations with Dr. Charlie Cartwright and my co-host, Julie Ruska. And so great to see you again, Julie.
So great to see you again, Dr. Charlie.
I'm really excited about our conversation today, and we're going to start off with forgiveness. And before we got rolling, you were starting to tell me a story, and then you said, "You know what? I'm going to save it for the podcast." So
Yeah.
I'll pitch it to you and let you speak on your experience.
Yeah, so recently I was in Texas for almost a week. And as I was leaving, I realized that I'd had so many profound conversations. And I also realized, which had not occurred to me for some reason, that I'd spent the whole week being the only white person. I had spent a lot of time with all Black people. And we had profound conversations about what's currently going on, Black Lives Matters, as well as the entire issue, all the way from slavery on. And what one of the women said to me, I will never forget. She got very teary and she said to me, "Julie, I will never understand from the time I was a child to today why people or how people could ever dislike me and even hate me for the color of my skin." And the pain that she felt when saying that, I just wanted to hug her and be like, "I am so sorry," right? Like, I am so sorry for all that you have endured. And I feel like a lot of people hear these stories, like your stories you've shared and other stories of injustice, of prejudice, of pain. And as a white person, I respond, "I'm so sorry," right? Which is completely genuine, but I also feel like it's not enough. And so that's where I kind of was like, gosh, I'm sorry. And how do we change this again? What can I do differently? What can I do better? And I do believe it starts with forgiveness. She didn't hold it against me. The prejudice, the racism that she's endured and the discrimination. But yet I feel like I want to apologize on behalf of the people that have done that.
Yeah, that's powerful. And it's so, that hurt is such a deep hurt, right? Because it goes beyond, hey, I had maybe a certain behavior that someone didn't like, and then they don't like me because of that behavior or something you said maybe. But when it just comes down to your physical appearance, which you have absolutely no power of to alter or didn't have any say in it coming into the world, it's really deeply hurtful that someone would just look at you and with such disgust, right? And
Right.
slash anger or dismissal. There's so many different levels to it. And so it is deeply hurtful. I think on the forgiveness side of it, it's important to understand that anyone that would view you that way or would treat you that way, their level of understanding as far as humanity is really lacking.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we have to help educate people and forgive those things. And I'm not talking about heinous acts, because there's
Right.
things people do that are criminal that should be prosecuted and are being prosecuted. There's no doubt there. But when it comes to mistreating another human being or withholding, whether it's information, withholding opportunity from another human being that impacts their life, their livelihood, their family, those are things that are very wrong. And at the same time, we have to learn from them and get past them as a community. And so that means that white people have to forgive themselves for maybe not knowing in some cases or what their ancestors have done.
Right.
You weren't here for that, and I wasn't here for it either. But then as a people, and I'm talking about as a race, as a human race,
Mm-hmm.
we have to move forward in a united way, understanding that we're sharing this planet, and the better that we interact and work together and understand one another, the better off all of our lives will be. And that includes the earth, the environment, everything. And so these conversations that we're talking about are a really big catalyst in making that happen.
Yeah. And I think when you talk about forgiveness, it really starts with the awareness, right? The understanding where are people coming from, what has happened that needs to be forgiven, because that's where I see a lot of lack of understanding.
Yes. And the only way to get understanding is actually to delve into it, right? Like we're doing and having these conversations and then going back and giving it thought and saying, hey, that's true, or I didn't realize that before, or I see another point of view or a perspective. And I think that from a corporate standpoint, I don't think that anyone wants an unfair advantage. I think that most right thinking people just want a level playing field.
Right.
And the reality is the playing field hasn't been level. And that's one of the things where sport is kind of a trailblazer in that, where that a person of color could go in to an event and play by the same rules as everyone else and excel, right? And so there's an opportunity there, obviously, to improve those fields in the different organizations, and then it's up to us as Black people to take advantage of those opportunities and to be at that high level of performance. Because if you look at from an athletic standpoint, we say Jackie Robinson,
Right.
breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball. Well, he was a great player before he had the opportunity. And
Yes.
so he was ready for the opportunity because he'd done everything necessary. So as Black people in this country, we need to make sure we're ready. We need to do all the things so that when opportunities open up, we're able to take advantage and prove our worth. But if we're not doing the things to make us ready, saying, hey, give me an opportunity, but you have to be also ready for that opportunity at the same time. And I think that's an important point.
Yeah. How do you just mentioned something, prove your worth. Does that ever frustrate you that you feel like there's already a barrier to becoming the person you want to be or arriving in the place you want to with achievement because you feel like you have to prove your worth?
Yes, it is. And it's very frustrating on one hand. And I've experienced a lot of frustration over the years. But then what I understand, it's so interesting, is that once I started my own business and got out on my own, and so now I got out from under a corporate umbrella, right? And so now I'm in the marketplace. So now there's not a manager or a boss or one organization that decides my value. It's the marketplace. And so the
Mm-hmm.
marketplace sees my value. And so to hear the things people say to me as far as feedback or the notes that I receive on a daily basis, and I read these things and I'm thinking to myself, I didn't suddenly become wise. I didn't suddenly become educated. I didn't suddenly become experienced. It's just being recognized. My value has always been there.
Yes.
So it's an important lesson to not let an individual or an organization or a group of individuals dictate our value as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
We take ownership and responsibility for that. Our value's there. Then from there, we make sure that we're using our value in a venue where it's respected, appreciated, and rewarded.
I love that. I love that. So going, that's brilliant to say. And I was thinking about as you were talking forgiveness and your grace with all of this, because you didn't talk about being frustrated. You just were like, this is what I did. And you have such maturity on the issue. What would you advise for someone that does feel frustrated and does feel like they're being marginalized?
A really good friend of mine I grew up with, we grew up from sixth grade on. And so, wow, that means we've known each other for over 40 years. It's
Right.
funny saying that stuff. I remember my grandparents saying that stuff. Now I'm just, oh yeah, I've known this guy for over 40 years. And so his name's Sanford Robinson and his wife's name is Karen. Give a shout out to Karen Robinson. She works with professional females. She's such a powerful woman, and I always call her my spiritual advisor. And so whenever I'm having a challenge or something like that, I call her and get guidance, receive guidance. And I told her husband, which we're great friends. He says, "Hey man, I'm not trying to make time with your wife. She just gives me, yeah, I know, I know, I know." So I wanted to clear that with them before, but
Yeah.
and I don't abuse it, but it's at critical times that I call. I call her the Oracle. You remember the Oracle in the Matrix movies, the Oracle?
Yes.
That character. So that's Karen. She's like the Oracle to me. And so I
Yeah.
remember one time I called her, the last company I worked for before I went out on my own. I remember calling her because I was frustrated because I was feeling all those things you said, marginalized, underappreciated, felt like I wasn't being valued, so many things like that. And she said something to me, and I'll never forget it. She says, "Charlie, you need to go where you're celebrated, not tolerated."
Ooh, I love that.
And I was like, wow, and I'm on the phone and I'm frustrated and all this stuff. But when she said it, again, it put the responsibility back on me, right?
Mhm.
That why should I be in an organization helping them make money, helping them prosper when they really don't respect my talent, my skill and ability for what it is? So why not take that talent, skill, and ability someplace where it is appreciated and that I'm rewarded for
Absolutely.
what I bring? And so that's exactly what I did. That's one of the great things about being in the United States. It's a free country and capitalist society, and so we bring a unique skill set to the marketplace. There are companies that will welcome that, and they don't care if you're black, blue, yellow, or green. That
Right.
you can help them succeed. You're a good person. You're reliable. You have a special talent and gift. They're like, "Yep, we'll take it." So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that because the reality is that racism does exist, and there are people that will see my LinkedIn photo and not work with me because of what my picture looks like,
Yeah.
and that's fine. I understand that because I know that the companies that do hire me have a competitive advantage over their competitors, and that we're gonna beat them in the marketplace, right? And we just keep beating them in the marketplace. That in itself is going to change some dynamics. So I'm
Right. It kind of
I'm
fuels you.
yeah, so I'm happy with that, and that's what I would encourage other people to do. Go where you can win, right? And it's so interesting. I remember a story because you had just mentioned we were talking earlier the Pittsburgh Pirates, and there's a story. They were the first Major League Baseball team to start 9 black players in the same game. Okay,
Wow.
so they started all black. Well, it didn't, and it wasn't a plan. It's just how it worked out. There's injuries, some guys had some time off, and so the players didn't even realize. And I think they went down like 3 innings in. I think they were down like 5-0 something, and they got together and said, "Hey, did you notice that?" They started all black, including the pitcher. Everyone starts black. We gotta bring it together. And so they won the game, of course. And those kind of things make it normal, and it's not an issue. And hey, actually, we had an advantage. We won because we had these talented athletes on the field at the same time. So that was a cool story for me just to look at and say, man, when you get the opportunity, prove that, hey, I can play at a high level. I can compete at a high level. I can execute at a high level. And once I do that, the color barrier goes away because now we're talking to a businessman or a businesswoman, and that's the ideal place to
Mhm.
be. So it's a great
Yeah.
question.
I can relate to that, and not saying that I can relate to what it's like to be a Black man, but I can relate to that as far as being a woman. And a lot of times, especially in the coaching industry, when I first started, I was a younger woman, and suddenly I had all of these established, and I'm gonna call them out, established white men telling me how I should act, how I should dress, how I should look, so I don't present the wrong image. And some of them, I do believe, were coming from a good place, but I did feel very marginalized by it. And when we talk about forgiveness, I can relate to that and feeling like I have to prove my worth and I have to be so good they can't ignore me, you know? And I think that that's something you're talking about too, is that you have to stop using all of those things as excuses to not be your best. Because what I see a lot of time, and this has nothing to do with race, it just has to do with humanity. When you feel like you're being held down, your instinct is to fight back, but in a way of because of this, and use it as an excuse, instead of using that as fuel to become so good they can't ignore you.
I love that. And when you use it as fuel, you'll become better and better and better. Then you'll get to a space, a point where you'll be dominant in your space. You'll be dominant in your industry. So it is something that'll drive you down to the ground if you let it, or it'll propel you to highest levels. And it's all how you choose to use that experience.
Right. So I want to go back to forgiveness and ask you a question. And in a prior podcast, we talked about when you were a 6-year-old child and how these white men pulled up next to you in a pickup truck and were calling you names, and how you took that in and you internalized it. And over the years, it created that anger in you and you took it out on the football field. Where did you get to the point where you needed to forgive so that you could be set free?
Ooh.
Woo!
That's a big one right there. And I was in my 30s,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole this anger I had, people would notice it, and I would be friendly. Well, friendly is not the right word. I would be cordial and
Right.
professional. And I remember I was working at FedEx. I was going to school full time, and I was working nights full time. And I was at the check-in area. So all these independent contractors, FedEx Ground, would come in, and I would process their paperwork and bills of lading. And it was important work because that's how they get paid. Their settlements, things to be right. And I remember a gentleman who I worked with, who's now become a dear friend. We were talking, and this is probably 5-6 years ago, and he says, you've changed so much since those early days at FedEx. And I was like, how so? And he said, well, he says, you were always professional, you were always cordial. He says, but I got the distinct feeling that if I said the wrong thing, you'd come through that window.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, you're probably right about that. He says, well, what changed? And I said, well, I came to a fork in the road. I'm either going to spend the rest of my life being this angry black man and waiting for anyone to say the wrong thing or make a mistake so that I could pounce on them,
Mm-hmm.
or I was going to grow beyond that. And if you look at great leaders, whether you're talking about Nelson Mandela, you're talking about Martin Luther King, they transcended all of the wrongs that happened to them. And they were peaceful people, right? And that's the way. And so it's not that I don't have a warrior spirit. I do,
Right.
but I've learned to be a peaceful warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is this. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than be a gardener in a war, right? So
I've never heard that. That's
yes,
a good one.
yeah. So peace is really true strength. And Gandhi said about forgiveness, he said, forgiveness is for the strong. He said, the weak cannot forgive. And
Right.
it's really true. So it's really a show of strength.
What would you say to the people out there who believe that forgiveness means you're letting people off the hook?
So forgiveness, I think people will correlate forgiveness with weakness, and it's not, it's strength. And you're not letting anyone off the hook. And it's not for us to punish them, though. Now, if there's a crime committed, that's a whole different thing as far as accountability and things like that. But I'm a big believer, and I've looked at it in my life, that karma is a real thing, and it's not some wives' tale or some myth. And
Right.
if you take the time to look back at people that you know that have wronged you, you'll find a distinct pattern of that it has its way with people. And so what I found is that karma keeps its appointments. Okay. So you don't have to worry about that. So how someone treats you is their karma, but how you respond to that treatment is your karma. And so I'll use Martin Luther King as an example. How many punches did he throw during his campaign?
Zero.
Zero. But he had punches thrown at him. How many bottles did he throw? Zero. But he
Zero.
had bottles thrown at him. How many rocks did he throw? Zero.
Zero.
But he had the strength to maintain that focus. And that's why we're speaking his name today. That's why there's a national holiday. That's why there's a monument for him, because he took that approach. If he threw punches back, if he threw bottles back, if he threw rocks back, we would not be speaking his name right now. There'd be no national holiday. There'd be no monuments. There'd be no libraries. There'd be no highways named after the man.
Right.
So that's the
So
difference.
true. So true. How do you think, and this is not that you can like channel Martin Luther King here, but how do you think he would be responding to what's happening today?
That's a great question, and I think that's a great point for us to end this episode and pick up the next episode with that question, because that's a great one, and I want to jump into it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Charlie, for being open to this conversation. And like you said, conversations instead of confrontations, that's how we change the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Julie.